Gamergate has become a boogeyman term that could be viewed in a similar way to the word woke, where woke encapsulates everything that is trying to ruin the things you love through progressive talking points like gender or feminism. Gamergate has become the equivalent term for those on the other side of the spectrum to lump in everyone who disagrees with those same progressive values and nonsensical beliefs that have rightfully ruined all entertainment for years. This brings me to the crux of this video, which is this article from Salon, What Elon Musk's War on Federal Workers Owes to Gamergate. The long ago troll tantrum from video gamers upset by women kicked off the culture wars for the stupid era. This article is a doozy, fellas, but it proves that despite losses across the board, the people who were perfectly fine to make everything you love lame and full of talking down points are still trying to gaslight you into coming over to their side. The bulk of this article's argument is targeted at Elon Musk and its Department of Government Efficiency, or as you likely know it being called as Doge for short. Obviously, Elon chose the name because of the Doge meme and the fact that he even admits using usernames aligned for Doge like Hairy Balls. Yeah, I know. Look, for a long time, whenever I played Call of Duty, I would use the username Dixon Balls, but that's only because the word Mike and Hunt was not available, unfortunately. Anyway, this website Salon makes the argument that the entire cultural shift of America and then some, not just in video games but everything, has one true origin that birthed all of this, which is Gamergate. Oh, and by the way, if you believe in Gamergate, you're also a fascist now. I didn't say that, but here's what this article says, and I quote, "Fascists have always been clowns, but it's a 21st century innovation that they're so proud of their juvenile behavior. Unfortunately, many in online journalism saw this coming a decade ago with the emergence of the dumbest social movement in American and probably world history, Gamergate." For those blissfully unaware of this history, Gamergate was the first major crowdsourced harassment campaign of the social media era. On its surface, it was mostly a bunch of young gamers having a year-long tantrum because they didn't want women getting girl cooties on their video games. But for those of us who watched it closely at the time, it was a troubling portend of what turned out to be a full-blown fascist movement. Doge owes everything to Gamergate, from its aesthetics to its tactics to its manpower, which largely draws on the same young men, now 10 years older, who were radicalized to the far right via social media. As journalist Max Reed pointed out recently, Musk's project isn't like Gamergate, but straightforwardly is Gamergate. Composed of many of the exact same people rehashing the same unjustified grievances literally in between bouts of attacking federal workers as parasites, Musk and his fanboys also whine that video games are too woke and this justifies fascism, end quote. So the fact that all of those very lefty wokey woke games failed, why transgender people can't compete in women's sports anymore. Although, do you ever notice how trans men never competed with men but only with women as well, because if they faced men in sports they would get destroyed? Which inherently confirms that the biological fact that men and women are vastly different in physical characteristics, but if you point that out, you're now a bigot suddenly? Well, luckily in the current era, common sense is becoming more common, and if you ask me, that's a good thing. I don't think labeling Gamergate as fascist is right either, because largely speaking, with the way things are now, if anything, people are more free than ever before. And I think if such policies are now in effect across the spectrum, like banning trans people from women's sports for an example, is that not a massive boon to the well-being of women specifically as well, to not have their spaces invaded by men who say that they're women? Of course, I do think the better argument in comparison here is to simply distill these two opposing viewpoints to single concepts. Wokeism is feelings over facts. Gamergate is facts over feelings. That's really what it all comes down to. And the realization of this, if you keep these ideas in frame, it all tends to make far more sense going forward if you ask me. Look at anything that the wokey wokes have done to your video games, your movies, or society in general. All of it can be distilled and reduced to the simple notion that what they're doing is them justifying their feelings over those of facts. Why did you make the cast of the failed Saints Row reboot a bunch of diverse people with a Rosario Dawson lookalike as the main hero, who can go knock out fully grown white muscle-bound men in a single hit? That's not realistic, is it? But it doesn't matter. Because it's those same feelings that are overriding these people's objective realities. The only way these ideas can fester and spread is if the collective delusion of a populace continues to buy into the idea that the tangible reality around them is nothing but a fabrication. And because of this, it's why so many things start to make a lot of sense, why so many traditional values, concepts, or ideas that you may come to have known have not necessarily been challenged but erased instead, because they know that they cannot challenge, say, the idea of James Bond. Because James Bond is a strong man who wills his actions into reality, and women of course chase after him. They can't beat that, but they can deconstruct him as a concept and womanize him by making him hold onto the hips of a female agent as she drives him away from harm instead, something Bond would likely never let happen due to who his character is. The point was to crumble the foundations of the castle while systematically ensuring the people who work within the castle to begin to reject their own reality in the sake of believing their feelings are in fact more validating than the facts that surround them. This is what Gamergate fought against. Salon states that the reason Gamergate existed was solely because fat incels were mad that women were taking over their video games. Not realizing that the actual reason Gamergate rose up was because, like I've been saying this whole video, instead of challenging the core values or concepts of what Gamergate stood for, which are facts over feelings and traditional values, that these feminists believed in their own hubris that they could circumvent all of this and usher in an era of collective delusion where their feelings could shape an industry that was originally based on facts. Salon would continue this by claiming this is actually what Gamergate stands for, as they say here. Gamergaters were motivated primarily by two grievances: that feminists were criticizing sexism in video games, and crucially, that these same feminists seem to have more sex than the Gamergaters. Not once have I ever seen that second point make any sense beyond the collective delusion of feminists in gaming. The first point, that feminists were criticizing sexism, is but another gaslighting tactic they used for years to justify their own actions. The reality is that video games had been full of perfectly capable and beloved female characters for years, well before their nonsense came to flood the market with their delusions that have been made fun of and rightfully got destroyed in the process. Sure, there were sexy women in video games, but objectively speaking, based on studies, even women preferred to play as idealized versions of women over whatever the hell is being pushed these days. A good example is that new free-to-play game, Mecha Break, which has very bodacious women within it. Why is that game blowing up in players, or say when Stellar Blade released, and many others too? Why is it that women, despite apparently hating these sexy characters, in fact only want to play as them when they're given the choice? You ask me? It's simple. It's because the human brain can identify what is actually healthy and should be prioritized over that which is bad, as in the case of obesity and such, on a primal level. Think about it. Women tend to go for guys who are either at the same level as them or usually above them. You can claim that it's sexism, but if you ask me, it's hypergamy doing what it's intended. Women, whether it's human or animals, females, they always go for the guy who can protect and provide for them. This is usually decided when a woman sees a man who has money, muscles, and so on. These things are intrinsically tied to her brain chemistry, so that when she sees those qualities, she will go, yeah, that guy can protect me. So then she goes for him over, say, a guy who can't protect her as well. You can get mad about it all you want, but it is what it is. And it's the same thing with video games. A woman will play the game and could be given two options. She could either look like the Tides of Annihilation main character, who is slim and fit and beautiful, or she can be a Concord character. And I guarantee you that 99% of women, real women I mean, will choose the Tides of Annihilation girl over Concord any given day. Why do women and even men go to the gym? Take care of themselves, care about their looks, and do things that may seem small at first, like brushing your teeth regularly, moisturizing, making sure you look presentable, smelling good, etc. This is all being done because these women, and men too, want to look and feel their best, and hey, who can blame them? These things are distinctively tied to our brains because we know if someone is fit and strong and takes care of themselves, that is ideal. What wokeism has tried to do with video games, TV, etc., society, whatever, is that they want to, in a sense, pull us all down to the same level that they're at. Which is to mean that many of these people who are trying to make your characters ugly or inject trans identity into these games and movies are almost always they themselves the same things that they're putting into that art. It's projection, is what it is, and they do this because they don't want to change or better themselves. How many times have you heard a fat person refer to themselves as being a part of the fat community? as if being fat is somehow an identity equivalent to, say, being gay or being born with a disability or something else. It's this collective delusional laziness that is ruining a lot of these things, and these types want to legitimize and make it the norm, so to speak, so they don't have to change themselves. Why try in life and better yourself when I can just gaslight myself into believing that all of my poor decisions are in fact good decisions? By other people who've made equally poor decisions like me gaslighting me into believing that I am doing the right thing, which is only being done to gaslight themselves in the end into believing that they too are doing the right thing as well. Now ping pong that collective delusion off all of these people and it just kind of spreads like a virus. You're not fat, you're big boned. Ignore the fact that your bones are the same size as your skinny friends. You're not a loser, society's just bad and mean because they don't accept you as you yet again do nothing to change your life. And just continue repeating the same actions that led to the same results that have left these people dissatisfied for years. This delusion spreads, like I said in other videos, and becomes what it has always been, a mind virus. And this mind virus has spread across video games, and it's true that because of people like me and others, we have made it our mission to lift this veil up from people's eyes so that they can see the world for what it actually is versus what these parasites want you to see. It's like Bloodborne. You know how you can't see the monsters watching you until you reach a certain level of insight? And once you do that, you can actually see the world for what it really is. It's basically like that. These feminists, they want you to live with zero insight, unable to see the strings that are being pulled from the shadows, and then Gamergate wants you to see the world for what it is. Warts and all, so that you can then come to your own conclusions and start making your own decisions. The point here is that yes, Gamergate was directly responsible for the election, the complete destruction of wokeness in video games and more. But it was a necessary crusade that had to be pushed, because if left unchecked, it would simply fester and destroy the world further. Imagine if you lived in a room that was just full of garbage and never clean. There's urine everywhere, it's disgusting, and you can never leave. That's wokeism. They want you to live in that filth. They want you to be normalized to the things around you that are objectively awful. But it's up to you to leave that room to get that breath of fresh air and escape it. And the more you listen to these people, they just want to clearly keep you in that room. Because as long as you're there, they can keep an eye on you. And that's what they ultimately want. Avowed is a good example of this grip of delusion with their art director who hates white people too. Imagine 20 years ago telling a developer that you can't hire white people and can only hire black people regardless of the talent of the applicants. You would be rightfully thrown out of the studio and told that you're an idiot for trying to be racist, but in 2025, things like that are not only allowed but encouraged, as we know that Matt Hansen is still working at Obsidian despite his comments on his hiring practices. But we both know if Matt Hansen said that I only hire white people over black people, suddenly he would get fired. A classic example of that mind virus, the delusion that has seeped in. Hansen is in that room under lock and key, being watched by others to ensure that he doesn't leave to see how things really are and start questioning things for himself. And like most abuse victims, these people are indoctrinated by this woke mind virus and they end up believing that they're abusers and captors over a time. Because eventually, it just becomes all that they know. And if wokeism is that sludge, that parasite that is keeping you in place as it feeds on you, then Gamergate is like the flaming sword that purifies the rod and cuts away the evil. It's the ultimate fact that no matter what these types do, that human beings will find a way to persevere. They tried so desperately to control you for so long, and they couldn't. They had us all living on our homes, afraid to leave the house in 2020, being told that you have to get a jab or you'll die. Then 5 years removed, here you are, still alive and breathing despite their fear-mongering claims. What I think was another casualty of the Gamergate war, so to speak, was that before certain developers were also seen as rock stars in a way. When someone like Kojima or whatever else came out on stage, oh wow, it's Kojima, he's the guy who made that thing that I like. Oh look, it's someone in the games industry, it's Greg Miller, the guy who worked at that company's website that I usually listen to and watch. But then you found out over time that these people are kinda awful, that they actually hate you and ultimately their beliefs, or that your claims are unfounded and you should be silenced in every single way instead of being given a voice at the table. Gamergate has not only destroyed wokeism, it's destroyed the delusion between the people and those who would want to claim they're somehow gods among men because of either their popularity or platform too. I don't see any of these people in a godlike light, instead you just see them for what they are now. They're just people like any other who can be torn down and challenged and deconstructed like any other person in this world can. One of the biggest insights for me is that Gamergate proved that the people above us are actually weak, and they're afraid that we now know this for sure. And their power really only comes from that same collective delusion that they bank on to ensure that you will fall in line because of fabricated concepts that they pushed for years. You see, originally video games were not made for everyone, and that was actually a good thing. Before, games were made for certain players, people who bought those kinds of games. They were made with those mechanics and the stories and concepts that resonated with the people who lived and breathed these virtual worlds. And once the wokeism came in, and with it, let's be real, a large dose of feminism as well, these feministic qualities began to permeate through games on every single level. And like any vile woman, not all women mind you, but there are evil women out there just like there are men, they do try to push others out of a space to co-opt it with deceit and lies so that they can push their way instead. Suddenly video games shifted. They used to be made for the players, but now they were conveniently being said to be made for everyone. But the problem is that you can't reasonably create something in an artistic sense that can be for everyone because it's impossible. This is why genres and such exist. Not everyone is going to vibe with the same music or movie. This is why there's horror movies or heavy metal music or rap and hip hop. We understand fundamentally that things have to be separated in order to thrive, otherwise it just kind of ruins it all if it all gets thrown into the same pile. What these feminists did to games was, instead of just making games for their crowd, which they know they couldn't, because as we can all see from the sales numbers of the games made, that would target them specifically, that there's not enough of them and they do not sell despite their voices trying to speak for the majority when they are actually in the minority. Instead, they just took what was made for a specific group of players, put their slop into it, and ended up making everything for nobody but their small little group. This in turn ruined entire IPs and franchises, which is why the West understandably is so weak when it comes to video games right now. Monolith, for example, just got shut down too as I was writing this, the Shadow of Mordor and War People. But of course, Rocksteady still gets to live despite delivering objectively the worst game in that studio's history with Suicide Squad. And Suicide Squad is a good example of what I mean, because they pushed a message and they made something for nobody. But they also injected politics into it and watched as they lost hundreds of millions of dollars in the process. What has happened to games is that they've ignored the core audience for this new audience. It's the modern audience slop narrative again and again. We don't need the people who are here, we need the new audience. Not realizing that the new audience is just the old audience anyways. They really think that there's 5 billion trans anti-Trumpers with infinite pockets out here that are ready to buy their slop when there isn't. But the fact that Salon tried to make the point that Gamergate was about women having more sex than they were, like, what are you even talking about? When and how has this somehow become the crux of the argument? All this tells me is that Salon in this article, which is of course written by a woman to nobody's surprise, seems to quantify the value of a person based on how much sex they have, which is, let's be real, really weird. I have a girlfriend, and I know that not all women are stupid, but some of y'all, some of you are really, really dumb, and I'm tired of acting like that isn't the case time and again. Claiming that Gamergate is because gamers don't have sex is stupid, especially when they've tried so hard to say that women make up 50% of all gamers in the world apparently. So are they also not having sex then too if they're gamers as well? Or is it only the gamers that you don't like that aren't because this is how you quantify someone's value? It's very weird coming from the same group who was constantly saying that, don't objectify me. But now watch as I objectify you. Again, like I said, man, feelings over facts. Once you keep that in the back of your brain, whenever you read anything that these wokies say, everything starts to make perfect sense. These people, they do not live within the rational realms of reality. Like, look at Salon continue with this. How dare women who have sex more than me make me feel bad about my sexist video games? Instead, they invented a claim that female game developers were exchanging sex with male journalists for good reviews. It wasn't true. Whether Zoe Quinn, who they're referencing to, did or didn't sleep with journalists for positive press coverage isn't what caused Gamergate to happen. What did, however, was that when this story started up, it was very obvious that the gaming media press submerged the story and refused to speak about it. And instead, they went out of their way to protect Zoe Quinn while ignoring the other side of the argument. And all that ended up doing was showing people at that time that there was indeed objective favoritism in gaming media. That who you were, what you represented, and what you voted against had certifiable reasons and claims that would either strengthen or weaken your place within that industry. Basically, what Gamergate blossomed into began and still continues to be about the ethics of video games journalism. And how even to this day, as this article I've been reacting to this video confirms, is that this same ethical games journalism talk is still 10 years removed from the catalyst of this entire movement, trying to push the agenda that in fact it's the gamers who are the enemy all along. And now this Salon article has gone as far as to say that if you're against gaming journalism, if you're pro-freedom of speech, Elon, Doge, whatever, it doesn't matter, but you are without a shadow of a doubt a bona fide fascist. But fascism is not what's happening right now. In fact, in this so-called fascist world that they preach exists, women now have more rights than ever before, and under the new American leadership, women's rights are more protected by ensuring men can't enter their spaces in a literal physical sense. What I've noticed is the more freedom that is given to women increases, so too does their hatred of everything around them as well. It's a perplexing Pandora's box of a problem. How are women equally more free now than in any period in the history of mankind, while also simultaneously being more miserable, alone, and self-loathing as well? But if I say that, I'm a sexist. When in reality, I'm just viewing the world objectively and seeing things for how they are. Many of these female games journalists especially, they clearly hate their jobs, they hate their targeted demographics, and they hate their gamers. So why continue working in this industry that you hate so much? The only possible reason is that these same journalists who claim toxicity is killing the industry from the so-called fascist gamers that are out here are the very same people who thrive and live for that toxicity as well. They're like someone who can't stop lighting houses on fire while complaining that there's a housing crisis. They're mental arsonists who feel compelled to burn everything around them while refusing to admit that they were the ones who started the inferno. You can't sit there and claim that gamers are sexist or fascist without realizing that it was your own articles and lack of due diligence in taking your job seriously, and not realizing the powers that you had at your disposal that led to the very outcomes and worldviews that you helped create. These female games journalists are Dr. Frankenstein being appalled that Frankenstein ended up killing people. Like, you controlled the buttons that you press, games journalists, and you clearly chose poorly. All Gamergate really is that people are tired of being talked down to or vilified constantly. Every other day, I can just hit refresh on Twitter and find a dozen examples of people attacking gamers or men, calling them horrible, while they simultaneously benefit from the internet, languages, society, safety, and systems that allow them to live their lives 1,000 times easier than their ancestors can. Thanks to the very men they so desperately want to convince themselves are the problem, because without men, let's be real, the society that you live in, it wouldn't exist. The houses you live in, the couches you sit on, the food delivered to your grocery stores is all predominantly made and brought by men. I just can't imagine hating a gender like this so much, it's stupid. Look, I don't hate women, but I do think that a lot of women are really stupid these days, and the more that they open their mouths, the more obvious it becomes that allowing these feminists to break into male-dominated spaces has been nothing short of catastrophic for everyone involved. I wish the games industry was full of women who weren't crazy liberal freaks who pop 7 pills a day to feel normal while claiming that Trump or Elon is going to throw them in a camp, while they ignore that the previous administration was locking them in their homes and forcing them to get a vaccine for a virus with an over 99% survival rate. If we can agree that not all women are bad people, can we also agree that not all men are incel, loser, fascist, whatever people too? True, I'm sure those guys exist, but it's delusional to believe that only one gender is somehow always right when they aren't. Gamergate was created by the collective self-delusion of games journalists, both male and female, that came together to prove that they abused their power, and used their positions to destroy that ethical rope, so to speak, that held their industry together. And ever since then, it has absolutely evolved into men and women both realizing that these people you thought were infallible were in fact idiots all along. And this growing movement that maybe the people tasked with controlling everything you love, whether it's video games or government, are probably not doing these things for the betterment of you as an individual. And they were perfectly content with destroying everything from the societal structure, flooding your countries with foreigners and everything else, but the thing that just broke the horse's back was that they just came for video games. They came for that one group of people who are notoriously antisocial and like to keep to themselves, who just kind of want to play video games, relax, talk to their friends, and enjoy these worlds, but you couldn't leave them alone. So now you vilified millions of people of both genders into never trusting you ever again, and it was all done by your own hubris. And ultimately, when it came to your elections, many of those gamers who probably wouldn't have voted in the first place suddenly felt emboldened to go to those polling stations because you vilified them and used strongman arguments to say that they were the problem and they need to shut up or else. All in all, the very woke mind virus and deniers of facts created the beast that has swallowed them whole. And the only person they can reasonably blame are themselves, and whether it's Salon here or any other website or journalist who claims otherwise, I just want you to know that they're wrong and they're idiots, and they do deep down in their souls want you to get in line and just eat the slop for eternity. They want to keep you in that room so they can control you, and fellas, it's up to you to ensure that you do everything that you can to get out of that room so that you can see things for what they really are. They decided to make everything lame and gay, so now everything is pushing back to become great and based instead. It's your fault in the end, you feminist weirdos, and no matter what you say or try to do, I will be here to ensure that I keep you all accountable. And from the bottom of my heart, suck my balls, you sword-losing morons. Thank you for watching, subscribe, and I'll see you later.